Well, hello everybody. It's time for the Christmas edition of Tree Lady Talks, and you know what that means? A load of bells.
Ho, ho, ho!
And there they are. Well, let's hope you're all getting ready for some festive fun and frolics. We're going to do a nice one today. It's the second time we've introduced this guest, and he's got a new book out. It's called the Tree Almanac 2024. Let's get into it.
So welcome to Dr. Gabriel Hemery. Gabriel, you're one of the people who've been on the podcast twice.
What a privilege.
Yeah, for those who didn't hear you on the Trees, Art and Literature episode in our first season, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, thanks for inviting me back, Sharon. I'm a forester, chartered forester, and proud of that. I suppose one of my main things I've done is I co-founded and now run as chief executive the Silver Foundation, which is a environmental and forestry charity based in Oxfordshire and active across the UK, supporting woodland owners doing science and running a wood centre in Oxfordshire where we support people working in wood. So that's my day job. And as a personal passion, I like to write.
Well, you certainly are very prolific, but just going back to the Silver Foundation, Noel and I had the privilege of visiting about a year ago, and you've got this incredible large barn.
Yes. So we've got kind of two things at the Wood Centre. One is a specialist business park where we help people set up their businesses working with wood. So furniture makers, boat builders, internal joinery, a whole raft of different businesses all focused in the one building in a sort of community spirit. So they share the same space, but they also collaborate on jobs together and so on. And some of that has got business incubation facilities to help people establish their business. And in another building next to it, we have our wood school where we do professional training for mostly young people coming out of college but needing more skills to find employment and to be successful. And through that, we're promoting also homegrown timber, so grown in Britain material, and working with colleges and with business. So we have some really great clients and quite well-known NGOs and businesses who commission us to make products for their commercial needs, but they're made by the students. It's a really interesting model where we obviously mustn't abuse the goodwill of the students, but because they're making commercial products, they have real-life experience working to deadlines and the quality control. And in return, because we can sell those products, we can actually charge a lot less than most other establishments would to do a 6-month training course. So that's proven really successful, and that's a lot of fun. And we're currently working on a big new ambitious program at the moment to try and deal with gender inequality in the sector.
Excellent.
It's pretty poor. It's something like 8% of people working on the shop floor, if you like, with machines and so on, with tools in the furniture and woodworking businesses in Britain are women. So 92% are males. It's a huge inequality. But we know that lots of women are training. They're just not getting through to business or not staying. So we're really passionate about that at the moment and doing a bit of fundraising to try and get that supported.
Well, when we visited, we actually met the Victoria and Albert Museum participants who were working with you on a 2-week programme, and that did represent a really diverse cross-section of people, which was really heartening to see. But that sounds absolutely fantastic. But we're here today to talk about your writing, and previously we talked about your fictional work, Tall Trees Short Stories, which I found really imaginative, and some of them have really stuck in my mind. But the book we're talking about today is the Tree Almanac 2024. Why did you write this book?
Well, it's an interesting one because it's quite small, but I wanted a way of trying to connect with everyone. So not being a specialist sort of tree audience, but your average man, woman, child on the street that might just pick up the book because it's a beautiful thing. It's really nicely produced, I think, in a small hardback or on a Kindle, of course, these days. But to try and make trees sort of come up in people's mind a bit more often. So really to try and reconnect people with the nature all around them. So pretty much everyone will walk past a tree every day or see one out of a window or out of a train as it's speeding through the countryside. But trees are there, and we perhaps don't always look at them and think about them. And I suppose for me, ultimately, as I say, it's a small book, but for me, the ambition was to kind of rekindle that everyday connection between people and trees. And the reason that I'm passionate about that is because I feel that, unless we have an affinity with the natural world, we're never going to achieve the next step, which is want to care for it.
Yes.
So, that's no more important than it is in our young people. But of course, it starts everywhere, every generation. And if people just are, in a small way, reconnected with nature, I think that would be a great thing. We can then create a better planet and try and deal with the big stuff that's, the big scary stuff, such as the biodiversity crisis that's, we're really suffering within the UK with lots of declining wildlife, but also even bigger stuff like climate change. And none of that will be ever met unless we find a better connection, a closer connection with nature. So, as I say, it's slightly, in one way, it seems slightly weird to talk about a small, relatively fun book in a kind of a serious way. But that's ultimately what drives me in all my writing. And I think in this book, I'd hope that I can achieve some of that in a small way.
I think that's so important because it really enables people to open their eyes to what's around them, but also connect with the seasons as well, because it is an almanac. So the book is divided up into 12 chapters. But I think what it does is it captures the imagination, it opens a new way of seeing, and it gets to the heart. Because when things matter to our heart, that's when we start to affect change.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. And as you say, I think by making it kind of accessible and, it is carved up into relatively easy chapters. And they got regular subsections. So there's sections looking at what to do in your garden or in the forest or the orchard, if you're lucky to have either those two things. But also what to see in nature and wildlife, what to see in the sun and the moon. And I've taken some traditional ideas that you get in an almanac, obviously like the sun and moon, but also tides. And you might question me and say, well, why you got tides in a tree book? Well, actually, I found an interesting way of dealing with that. I've written about tree tides. I don't know if you've come across that term before.
No, I haven't. Tell us about tree tides.
For tree tides, the idea is that, of course, the moon exerts a massive influence on our water body. So, areas like the Severn can move up to 4 meters or something in a high tide, which is a massive amount of influence on our water bodies. So if you imagine it does that on the sea, everything has water in it, including trees. And inside the free water inside a tree stem and branch will have some influence exerted by that gravitational pull of the moon. So actually trees swell a bit as the water's pulled up through their stems, and equally when the moon is waning, the water content reduces in the stem. So there's a mini tide happening inside every tree every month that we can't see visually. And you might question, well, why is that important? Well, actually, jury's out, and being a scientist, I've got to be careful, but it's a bit of fun, really, here that actually the theory is that if you fell a tree at a certain time with the lunar cycle, you can have less moisture content in the tree or more water content in the tree. And depending when you do it, it might help you dry the timber more efficiently to have less shrinkage in the tree, which it can be quite an expensive and problematic thing for sawmills. So there's a bit of fun. There's good theory in it. The jury's out as to whether it's true or not. So, but in the book, I've written there are certain times of the month, certain times of the year when it's best to fell a tree, and that's called moonwood felling.
I read about that. That's fascinating. Thank you for explaining. I wonder if you could go a step further, which is really not practical at all. But think about pruning some of our more sensitive trees and avoiding pruning them when the moon has waned and they're rather dry, and therefore might be more susceptible for harmful pathogens entering the timber.
You think that's a good thing we should put in then, isn't it?
I think let's make arborists' job even more difficult. Now, of course, commercially that's a complete nightmare. But I guess if you're doing your own garden pruning, it's something that you could follow.
I think so.
Yeah.
In the book, I'm pretty keen on pruning. I've always something I've advocated a lot in to try and improve the quality of trees in in woodlands for timber production. So I've definitely stressed the importance of pruning certain species at certain times of year. So traditionally, it's cherry and walnut, for example, you prune for timber in July.
Yes.
Most of the other species you prune when they're fully dormant in the winter. And of course, it's slightly different rules for fruit trees. So I have stressed that. But you imagine layering on top of that different times of the month within those periods.
Yes.
It's quite complex, but maybe we should think about that.
I'm sure in these days of AI, there'll be an app for that. That's something that you could develop, Gabriel.
Yeah, send you a little notification in the morning. Today is a good day to prune your whatever it might be.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, great idea, Sharon. That's we should get on with that straight away.
One of the other things I liked in the book, because I'm quite crafty, is you've got little tips of things to make. Tell us about the December Christmas tips for making these little pine trees with pine cones.
Yeah, so scattered throughout the book, there's there's recipes and there's small craft projects, there's a bit of whittling and that sort of stuff. And I suppose I was thinking about things that might be quite nice to make at Christmas time. So rather than going down the sort of plastic bauble route, I just thought it'd be a great idea to suggest people can collect cones and make mini Christmas trees. And there's all sorts of things you can do to dress them up to make them look quite attractive. So you have a very naturalistic, completely zero plastic, zero carbon Christmas tree decoration made out of pine cones. That was the idea.
No, I like that very much. I've done similar things all my life. And the other thing I like about the book, it goes beyond just trees. It talks about the ecology that you might find in each month.
Yeah, and I suppose I've allowed my favourite things to creep through. So I've got a love of woodcock, which is a fascinating bird, which is like a woodland wader, like a snipe. If you know what a snipe is, you see on an estuary. A woodcock is a most amazing bird that visits in November. It comes over from Scandinavia and has cryptic camouflage. It's so well camouflaged you can't see it, even if you're about to step on it. And in fact, they almost do wait until the very last second till they think you're about to step on them before they fly out, which can cause you quite a surprise. And they've got this incredible 360-degree vision because their eyes are placed really high on their head. If you were to draw them, you'd think you're drawing a really bad bird because it doesn't look right. So the eyes are very high on their heads and they can see right round them without moving their head. So that's why they're sort of the most amazing sort of camouflage birds. And they, as I said, they fly from Scandinavia. And there's a lovely folklore around woodcock, which is that the goldcrest, which is our very smallest bird, often lives right at the top of our pine and spruce trees. The folklore was that they would pilot the woodcock over from Scandinavia. They'd sit on their backs and steer them as they flew over. So I wrote a poem about that, actually. If I could read it out to you if you want.
Oh, yes, please.
So you got to, remember it's the woodcock pilots and they come in the autumn. So it's a very short poem. It's called Woodcock Moon. And that's actually the name of the full moon in November in Britain. It's called the Woodcock Moon.
I didn't know that.
A mere 5,000 miles to fly, rising from the Russian steppe and guided by a crest of gold to fall upon the English cold on the night of the Woodcock Moon.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful.
It's a lovely story, isn't it?
It is lovely. I mean, I could really imagine that. That's fantastic. And actually, to help with imagination through the book, there are the most stunning pen and ink drawings of wildlife and trees and things relevant to the chapter. So it's a real celebration of science, art, craft and practical tips, as you say, to get people thinking and doing in their garden or forest. So,
yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I agree. I think the drawings are lovely, and the publishing team did a great job. They assembled, great artists, and it was a joy to work on the book. Actually, it's been a lot of fun. I'm really pleased to say that they've just commissioned a 2025 edition, so I'll be working on another one soon.
That's great. I'm sure it'll do really well because it's beautiful. It's quite small, but it's chunky and it's just nice to touch. So I personally do not have a Kindle. I have massive bookcases because there's nothing like the smell and touch of a book. But one of the other fun things that I quite enjoyed, I did enjoy in the book, was the Tree Zodiac.
Yes.
Tell us, what is the tree zodiac and what are you?
So the tree zodiac's based on a Celtic distribution of trees. So it's linked to the moon. So we have 13 moons in a year. So the Celts linked a tree to each of the 13 moons. And when I say a tree, there's a couple of slightly weird inclusions, such as reed. And you wouldn't think a reed was a tree, but that's what they called it. So I had a bit of fun with this. And with each of the 13 trees, I wrote a character, if you like, a zodiac. For that character. So my birthday's just gone. I'm in early December. So I'm an elder. So I wrote an entry for that, which I could read, or I could do yours if you like. What's your one?
No, let's do yours first and I'll read mine for fun.
I'll find it then. So sorry, I've lost my place.
That's all right. Well, I'll read mine while you find yours. So my birthday is July the 16th and I am a holly. And it says here, sometimes you hide in the shade of others, but everyone recognises your nobleness and tolerance. Now, I wonder actually if my birthday was the wrong day because I'm a terrible show-off, Gabriel. It's true that you can be a little prickly when young, but this is often a necessary trait to buck the trend and you will soon grow out of it. In fact, your smooth features, together with the pure white soul you exhibit in later years, draws admiration at every turn. Sorry, I take that back. I am 16th of July. You are fiercely protective of those within your inner circle. Oh, yes. Compatible with ash and elder. Mm. So, I mean, Noel, you're an oak.
I'm elder.
And you're an elder. Noel, you're an oak. I mean, oh, dear. Oh, dear. That's not good, is it? No, I really like that.
What does it mean? No, what does it mean?
What does it mean? It means we're not compatible. Oh, my goodness.
You're compatible with me.
Yeah, that's right. So Noel is strength deep within his body. Even when young, he possesses a maturity beyond your years. Some think you might be big-headed. But those who know you better can only watch in admiration at your incredible ability to foster and care for those around you. That's true. Even though you have a propensity to attract bolts out the blue, your legendary strengths means you are relied upon to build constructive and lasting legacies, compatible with ash and reed.
That's interesting because I was born in Seven Oaks.
So, Gabriel, tell us about you being an elder.
Oh, I'm an elder, yes. So I'm apparently freedom-loving, wild at heart and fiercely independent. No one must stand in your way as you seek one challenge after another. Sometimes extrovert, blossoming with fruitful creativity, you also have a tendency to become withdrawn. Oh dear. Although you are generous and friendly, those who attempt to cut you down in any way will soon realise their folly, compatible with alder and holly.
How wonderful. That's brilliant. It's a bit of fun, but actually I recognise the character of the trees in that. So may I go back to myself, as I'm a terrible show-off. I like the reference to holly in that you're prickly when young and smooth when you're older, because obviously they're prickly when young to stop them from being eaten. Yes. And then the leaves turn smoother, higher up in the crown where they're not going to be browsed.
That's right. You know that. Yes. I don't know if other people do. So, if you look at the holly, a bigger one, once it's grown out of a sort of the browsing zone, the leaves are actually quite smooth. They're only prickly when they're low down, which is an amazing adaptation by nature. You would how does that even happen? It's an amazing thing, isn't it?
It is.
I had a bit of fun trying to write the characters and the character of the trees themselves. So I hope people will see that if they read their own entry.
Absolutely, it's great. And the book is also really helpful in that it describes some terms for, say, coppicing, for example.
Yeah, so I got sort of lists of various things just because I think it's quite fun. I quite like lists and statistics and stuff. So I had a bit of fun. I listed all the different collective nouns for trees and woods, and there's quite a lot. Certainly when it comes into the sort of more regional or country-based ones. So I'm sure people know about words like copse, but less usual ones like dingles and cants and crumholes and things like that. So,
but perhaps we can tell the listener what a dingle is, for example.
Well, dingle's often used in Wales, actually. It's a very steep-sided wooded valley, so you get lots of dingles in Wales, but also in the north of England you get dingles, and they often appear in a name, so a place name you might see the word dingle. In fact, a lot of these terms appear in place names anyway. Have you come across a break before?
I haven't come across that.
That's a thicket, typical with shrubs. Let's see another one you might know. I guess a hag.
Oh, isn't that
With a double
woman?
G.
Oh, okay. Right. I've heard
That's
of the other
clearing.
meaning. Oh,
Clearing in a
okay.
wood or forest from Old Norse, often used in northern England. So I don't know if you want me to read it out, but I had a bit of
Yes,
fun trying to
please.
put as many of these as I could into a poem. Shall I read you the
Yes,
poem?
let's hear the poem.
So it's called All a Spinney. And do you know what a spinney is?
A spinney is a very small woodland, isn't it?
Yeah, often used for shooting. So you've got to spot as many collective nouns. You'd have to do a little piece of paper because there's a lot
Okay.
of them. Okay, here we go. All a spinney. Hunting for game, so I thought, in the spinney, not for trees, but soon so fiercely distracted by leaf, bowl, and canopy. Traversing hot chaparral, crawling under crumholes, fighting through beer and thicket, eye fixed upon distant clump and hanger. A passage, framed with silver line, along a double avenue, past an orchard, before the thickening bush and lively copse of wood and forest. The workers watched and toiled while the coppice stood, over by giant standards, hemmed in by hedge and row. When from a clearing beyond the coop and shrubbery, I spied her shimmering Samara, beckoning me towards the cant. She sat proud amidst the holt of the rising Randall above the dell, though others had fared less well in the hag or withy. There at last, a perfect figure, heart for xylarium, soul to arboretum, an ash queen shining on her grove of gold.
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful.
I should have done a count. I don't know how many were in
I've
that.
actually been writing them down, so I'm just going to go. You count and I'll count. I'm ready.
33, I think.
Oh, I got 33.
Do you?
I honestly did.
Amazing. We must have counted correctly then.
Wow. Now that's really good. Well, that's just certain. We should bring back these wonderful old words into the English
are.
language.
Mm.
And
I think
perhaps people have a richer use of language. Again, it takes you to the heart and inspires you to act. So, yeah, very good. Well, I absolutely love the Tree Almanac, and it's very affordable, and it makes a great present for a loved one or a friend. So, available everywhere. I absolutely love this time of year, Gabriel. I mean, I am Mrs. Christmas. We've got 3 Christmas trees in our house, including a 17-foot one out the front for the village to enjoy, and they are enjoying it.
And what species are those?
It's a Picea abies out the front, and inside we've got a Nordman fir. But this is my really bad confession. Left over from my past, I have a small plastic one. So it enters a great debate. What is better for the environment, a real tree or a plastic tree? What are your thoughts?
I guess once you've got a plastic tree, you should keep it, right? Unless you can recycle it. So, you should hold on to the plastic one, I suppose. But you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say go for a real one, and you get the real smell, and you get the experience of having a real tree, and it's of course carbon neutral and all those sort of things. And of course, there's deeper things too, in that. Of course, they've been grown by someone ordinarily probably by an owner who's got other woodland. And actually, Christmas tree growing is quite an important part of the rural economy for some landowners. So, you know that by buying that tree, you're probably helping them manage the rest of the estate well. And, you know, they can be great for wildlife in their own right, these Christmas tree plantations. But equally, you know, they might be surrounded by ancient woodland with lovely dead trees with rich with wildlife. So, I know an owner up in the Chilterns that does amazing stuff with their estate. So they grow tens of thousands of trees, but they also have lovely ancient semi-natural woodland. And Christmas tree growing makes the whole business thrive. And they have exemplary woodlands full of wildlife and produce great oak and ash and other timbers as well. But Christmas trees is, as I say, just part of that business. So for a deeper reason, I'd say buy real and support local business as well.
Yes, we supported local business and we chose our 17-foot tree, and it was just down the road, and they cut it, and then Noel and our neighbours put it up.
You didn't put it on the top of your car roof, did you?
No,
Yeah.
not now. I've got a mini.
Well, we're just going to break off very quickly from the interview because Sharon, rather coincidentally, if you want to know where to get a 17-foot high Christmas tree from, is going to speak to somebody who's got one or two of them. This is Andrew Ingram, and he lives at Christmas Common.
So welcome to Andrew Ingram from Greenfield Farm, Christmas Common in the Chilterns. Thank you for joining us.
Not at all, delighted.
Well, I understand you've been growing Christmas trees for quite a while.
I planted my very first Christmas tree in sort of November of 1970, so 53 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
I've got about 120 acres of Christmas trees at the moment, varying from transplants, which are sort of 25 centimetres tall, through to 10-metre trees.
And what sort of species do you plant?
Predominantly AB's Nordmanniana, or Nordman fir as they're known.
Yes.
But we also still grow Norway spruce, which is the old-fashioned traditional tree. Also, we plant Serbian spruce and also another fir. It's a blue fir called AB's Lasiocarpa, which is a corkbark fir from America.
And have you noticed a change in fashion over the years, and is that hard to predict?
No, it's the fashion. I mean, as I say, the old-fashioned tree through the sort of 70s, 60s and 70s, 1960s, 70s and 80s was a Norway spruce, which is the old-fashioned tree which Prince Albert, I think, introduced to the country when he was married to Queen Victoria. But then gradually, sort of in the sort of middle, late 80s and early 90s, this variety called Nordman fir came in. And it's a fir as opposed to a spruce. And they have a sort of different sort of way where the needle is connected to the branch, and it's rather stronger than the old-fashioned or the way the spruce is connected. So it tends to hold its needles better, and it's much softer. It's not spiky in any sense. So it really took over the market. It began to come onto the market in the very early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And it's now probably got 85% probably of the UK market is Northern fir.
Yes, I remember that change actually, because it always used to be Norway spruce, and now many of us have Norman fir. And what size do you plant the trees at, and what distance apart?
They're transplants. They're what we call 2+2 transplants. So they're actually 4 years old when we get them. They would be roughly 25 centimetres from the root collar, to the tip of the leader. So about 10 to 12 inches tall, the actual tree, and then the root is below it. They will be 4 years old.
And what sort of spacing do you plant them at?
Spacing 1.2 metres by 1.2, or 4 foot by 4 foot. We now plant on the square, so we not only in lines, but we also have lines going both ways. We use satellite navigation equipment, which allows us to plant really within a centimetre of where we want it. And so it gives us access to mow rather than spray. So we can mow between the trees rather than spray.
That sounds great. I was going to ask you, what sort of maintenance do you do, and how do you cope with drought years?
Drought years are our worst enemy. 2022 was pretty grisly. We effectively had no rain for about 4 months here. And we were watering. I know people who lost 100% of their crop. We lost about 25 to 30% of our crop, which we were able to replace that autumn. But we sort of just got a very old-fashioned system. We had a big bowser. As I say, the trees are planted in lines, and we could straddle the trees with the bowser and the tractor, and we just ran up and down the rows, and there was sort of spouts coming down from the bowser, went straight onto the line of trees. And we watered them about 8 or 10 times and kept most of them alive, but it was nip and tuck. We nearly didn't make it, actually. We could have lost a lot. And if we hadn't watered, I think we would have lost a lot, yeah.
And it's not cheap to water either, so it's a massive on cost, isn't it, that you hope you don't have to pay for.
Indeed.
But once they're established, what sort of height do most people buy a tree at, and how old is that tree? How long does it take you to grow a Nordman fir?
The average tree that we sell here, we retail, we do wholesale and retail. But our retail trees, when we're sort of directly interacting with the public, the most popular size is a sort of 2 meter to 2.25, which is roughly a 7-foot tree. And then the next popular size is the one below that, which is 1.75 to 2 meter tree, which is a 6-foot, a small 6-foot to coming up 7-foot.
And how long does it take for the tree to grow to that size?
Well, on my farm, as I say, when I get the transplant, it's about 4 years old. It is 4 years old. When I sell the tree, it will have been growing, a 6 to 7-foot tree will have been growing on my farm for a minimum of 6 years and could be 7 or 8. So I would think the average of 7. So a 6-foot tree is probably actually, between 10 and 12 years old from seed. But actually on my farm, it's less than that, because 4 of those years are in the nursery, the plant nursery.
And since you started in the 70s, have you noticed a change in growth rate in the last 10 years? Because we have had some really hot, dry summers. Have things slowed down?
No, I mean, at Christmas, particularly a Nordman fir, does all its growing in about 3 weeks. It's the buds burst in sort of end of May, beginning of June, and then the full leader extension occurs over the next sort of 4 to 5 weeks maximum, really. We haven't noticed any slowdown in the growth rate, no.
Well, I really recommend that listeners look at your website, thetreebarn.co.uk, because there's a couple of really beautiful videos. There's the aerial video, which just shows you the landscape of your farm and all the different ages of the trees. And you've got some really mature trees, well, not mature in terms of forestry, but in terms of Christmas trees. Have you ever sold a tree to any particular special locations?
Yeah, we have. We do a lot of big London hotels, have done in the past. We've done 10 Downing Street 3 times, but we don't sell that tree. You get to do that tree if you win the national competition for the best tree. There's a group of people called the BCTGA, which is the British Christmas Tree Growers Association. And they have a competition every year. And if you're lucky enough to win that competition, you get the privilege of donating the outside tree, the big tree to the left of the front door of 10 Downing Street. As I say, you don't get paid for it, but you gain a huge amount of publicity and notoriety. So it's well worth doing. But we've done it 3 times, so we're very happy having done that. But we do, as I say, a lot of Oxford colleges, a lot of new some big hotels in London. And, we do Henley Town, we do Wallingford, we do a lot of local towns. They're big trees. So, yeah.
That's rather wonderful. In terms of your own land, I looked at the aerial video, and it looks to me like you have some native woodland on your estate as well. Is there a link there? Does it help with sort of management of the native woodland, the business, if you don't mind me asking?
No, you're more than welcome. We got 350 acres of predominantly mature beech, which we have thinned and we have spaced, and we got underplanted with softwoods and hardwoods as the final crop, the softwood being the nurse crop. There's really no interaction or comparisons that I would or could make with, the traditional forestry and Christmas tree growing. They're very different sort of forms of the same art of growing trees, but we spend an awful lot of time shaping trees. I mean, every tree is handled at least once or twice a year, by hand with sort of shears and secateurs, get it to the perfect shape. We try and slow up the growth. In fact, you talked about growth. We don't want that leader to go more than 10 to 12 inches a year. And in a wet year, it will grow 3 times that. So we spend our life trying to slow it down. And so we get a perfectly nice pyramidal or triangular tree, which is dense and full.
Gosh, there's a lot of work involved. And do you have members of the public? You have a retail element as well, so people come to the tree barn and buy their own tree. Is that?
Yes, they do.
I bet that's a happy time, isn't it? It's a lot of fun.
It's a happy time. I always say, if you're in the retail business, there can't be many nicer products to sell than a Christmas tree.
Yes.
It's a happy time. The families come out, children and that sort of thing. And everybody's happy buying their tree. And we have a good, well-established retail business. And I think I've said a number of times, you'd have to be very stupid not to be successful growing trees at a place called Christmas Common.
I think it's really...
We got a head start on everybody else with the name of the village that we work from.
That's really wonderful. And finally, Andrew, I do hope you've got your Christmas tree up. Have you at home?
No, it's far too early. It's the 18th of December. We've got another week before we can put it up. We'll put one in the house on sort of Saturday this weekend.
Yes.
Which is the traditional way of doing it. I mean, when I was a boy, you never brought the tree into the house, and it had to last till 12th night, which is June the 6th. Nowadays, people buy. We sell a lot of trees in November, and they say, "Well, look, we're spending a lot of money on this product. We want our money's worth." And I don't think they do 12th night or anything like that. It's got to be there for Christmas. Boxing Day, it's out. So there's been a change in emphasis in the market. Is people want their tree earlier. They want them to last longer. But once Christmas is gone, I think they're booted out back door pretty quickly.
Yes, it certainly has changed. And I think some of that is due to the pandemic. I've noticed that since then, people are starting Christmas in November, which I don't hold with at all. But we did put ours up fairly early this year. But Andrew, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for sparing your time at this exceptionally busy time of year for you at Christmas Common. So happy Christmas.
Delighted, Sharon. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thanks very much, Andrew. And of course, you know what to say now to little Jimmy, who's sitting in the corner, morose because of a lack of a Christmas tree, when he says, "I want one of those like that Prime Minister's got, please." You know where to go. Go straight down to Christmas Common, see Andrew, he'll sort you out. Okay, let's get back to Sharon and her interview with Gabriel.
But I wonder really, can we just explain to listeners about why a tree is carbon neutral?
So a tree is carbon neutral because what it does when it grows is it sucks in all the carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas, and it locks it up inside its stem and its branches. And it will never release those until the tree is rotted or being burnt. So a Christmas tree, you do release the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere when you recycle that tree, assuming you do, of course, and don't plant it somewhere to carry on living. But of course, it's one of many trees, and every year they grow more trees. So it's a neutral cycle. The very best thing we can do with trees is to use a timber that's grown in them, because that's not the case with Christmas trees. But with let's say your big Pisces abies, which is if it wasn't cut down for the Christmas tree but grown to produce beams or cladding or other construction timber, that timber would lock up that carbon dioxide for as long as the building stands, and that's why growing trees is so great for the environment.
And tell the listeners about different types of Christmas trees that we commonly see in our garden centres.
The most common Christmas tree always was the Norway spruce. That was the classic Christmas tree, certainly when I was growing up in the 70s. So they have quite sharp needles, and they're very commonly the ones that drop a lot of needles all over the floor in your living room or hall. These days, a lot of other species are a bit more popular. So I think you said you had a Norman's fir. That's quite blunt in its leaves. It's not so prickly. It holds onto the needles all through Christmas. So those and some other species are perhaps nicer smelling or nicer looking, like blue spruce and so on, have become much more popular these days. It's interesting, in the States, they use completely different range of species, not necessarily because they grow better there, but they just have different traditions. They're used to seeing a slightly different tree.
Oh, okay.
If you go to any of our... Sorry?
What did they use in the States?
Oh, I knew you'd ask that, and I can't actually remember.
We cut that bit out. That doesn't matter.
gonna have to. I think it's I think they use some pines as well, like lobley pine. I think.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember. I know there's a funny list of them they use. Fraser fir is another one, I guess, which is available here now, but less commonly.
Lovely. And we also decorate our halls with boughs of holly and ivy as well.
And mistletoe.
And mistletoe. So first of all, why do we do that? What's the tradition behind draping our halls with holly and ivy?
A lot of that's connected to our pagan origins, so before Christian times, when greenery and so on was so important as part of the calendar, and something that had a evergreen, so not conifers in this case, but are broadly. So holly and ivy and mistletoe are all evergreen, so they keep their leaves all through the year. There's a sort of mystical, sort of magical thing about that, and people really appreciated that. And for that reason, it became connected with, the difficulty of when you're perhaps most hungry and most cold and life was most difficult. There was promise in those plants. They reminded you that the good times will come back, that you can survive. For that reason, they sort of entered our consciousness, didn't they, as a symbol of positivity in a time when maybe, we most need it.
Absolutely. And a mistletoe, of course, we all like to have a kiss underneath the mistletoe. But why do we do that? Where does that come from? And also, what is mistletoe and how does it grow?
Might ask that. Isn't it right? It's a hemiparasite.
Yes.
Parasite. So what it does, they have the amazing sticky berries that thrushes love. They're like a holly berry, but white, and they're completely sticky. So when the thrush feeds on them, it has to try and wipe them off the stickiness off their bill, and very often they end up wiping that stickiness into a sort of crook of a tree, and that's where the seed can then actually germinate and grow and put roots inside the host tree. Very often it's apple, but it could also be poplar. You see them on as well. So it then takes all it needs, rather than from the soil, it takes it direct from the cells of its host tree. And it's semi-parasitic because it also has green leaves, so it can photosynthesize, create its own sugars from sunlight. But actually, it's not a brilliant parasite because it does often kill the trees. I've certainly lost a couple of trees in my own garden. I had some nice apple trees covered in mistletoe, and I probably let them get too covered because the apple trees slowly declined in health. So it's a delicate balance, I think, between growing mistletoe and not allowing it to take over the tree.
Oh, okay. Well, I've really enjoyed talking about the holly and the ivy, and of course it's a wonderful Christmas carol. And so, Gabriel, what else are you working on? You've been very prolific. Perhaps you could start off by telling us on what you have been working on recently in terms of your other literature, and then what you're working on now.
Sure. Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, so I suppose my big project at the moment is I'm working on a triptych of books called The Forest Guides, publishing with Bloomsbury Wildlife. And these are, they will be a series of 3 books looking at first Scotland, then Wales, then England. And overall, be a guide to 1,000 woodland sites across Britain that you can visit. So it says where to go, where to park, what you can see, dealing with the history, key wildlife, landscape scenery. And I suppose my ambition was to enable anyone in Britain to be within, say, 20 minutes or 30 minutes of a woodland somewhere they can visit. So they have to be publicly visitable woodlands. The first one in the series was for Scotland, and that came out in April this year. I've written Wales, and that's coming out very early in 25. And then I've got England the year after that.
That sounds like a lot of work. So how do you know that all of those woodlands are accessible or near to public rights of way?
Well, Scotland was quite easy because of right to roam. England and Wales is different. So,
yeah.
You can get a lot of information from OS Map. So, a public footpath or right of way, but also, common ground or other open access ground is sort of marked out. I've become quite good at GIS. I know how to use some of the more technical ways of getting good data together. I suppose for me, a lot of the work has been doing the photographs. So initially, I thought I was just producing a text, but it ended up that the publisher was really keen to use my photographs. So I've had to do a lot of field work. And I have to say that's lovely. I love my job at Silver, but I am stuck behind a desk a lot. So for me, it's been a great catharsis to on my weekends and in the summer during the evenings as well, to go out to sites and sometimes to camp for a week, visiting lots of the most beautiful places around Britain. And what's lovely for me is I do the research first. I follow my own recommendations of where to park and where to go. And it's always very rewarding to have read something and to turn up at a place for it to be the right place, and then to sort of see with your eyes everything you imagined and wrote about in the research, coming to life in front of you. And so it's been a lovely thing, a lovely series to work on. A lot of work, but very rewarding.
That's wonderful. You're an incredible photographer. And so tell everybody your website where they can see your photographs.
So my website is gabrielhemery.com. So yeah, you can read more about my books, see my photos, and I write a sort of regular blog and a newsletter for people who are interested to follow me.
Well, I highly recommend that people sign up to the blog. I do, and keep in touch with what you're up to. But what else are you working on at the moment?
Well, I can't talk too much about them, but I think it's going to be 2 field guides, sort of slightly different. One, sort of a easy access, sort of beginner's guide to trees, so to identify them, and something at the other end of the scale, much more sort of academic piece of work, looking at a lot of different trees and how to identify them and their characters and so on. So yeah, there'll be big projects that will happen after I finish working on the forest guides. Gosh,
you're busy. And how rewarding. I love the idea of taking yourself off for a week on your own, travelling around to take photographs.
Large hairy dog has to squeeze in the tent with me, so that's quite fun.
Finally, Gabriel, what's your dream scenario?
There's one thing that always comes to mind, and I think my ultimate ambition would be in society that everyone planted a tree for every year they lived on the earth. And I always say to people, it's never too late to start. And for people who've not planted a tree before, they might be quite surprised that you can plant a lot of trees in quite a short time. So even if you're as old as me, in the grand old age of 55, I can plant my 55 in an hour or two. So I encourage everyone to find somewhere like a local charity or community group and go and plant some trees, and just remember to do one for every year that you've lived, and then keep up. Don't get too far behind.
I really like the idea, and there's so many good charities around where you can do that. And if you can't do it physically, you can donate. But really, if you can do it physically, you should. So that's a great idea and a challenge for everybody going into 2024. Gabriel Hemery, it's been an absolute joy to interview you again. You are a prolific and talented writer and a real influencer in industry. So we thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
Happy Christmas.
Oh, happy Christmas too, and thanks. You're a great interviewer, so mutual admiration.
That's it for this year, folks. We will be out again on the 5th of January. So it's Happy Christmas from me.
And it's Happy Christmas from me. Happy Christmas, everybody.